All right. I think, I don't know where Kanika is, but I think that's so nice that Harish and I are now wondering what do we need to do. The best part is Pallavi sent across questions to everybody and they didn't read it. Harish and I said we're not going to exchange any questions. So this is going to be absolutely unscripted. It's going to be a lot of friendly banter. It's going to be a lot of in the face. So if anybody who's a heart patient and wants to step out, you can step out right now. This is a statutory warning. Being in this room for the next 20 minutes is going to be injurious. So please insulate yourself. Jokes apart, I think we were having chai together just 5 minutes back and someone walked up to Harish and said, I've been seeing you since my school days. College days. I love the way the rebuttal came out saying college days, not school. So college days, so Harish said, am I that old? But before we get to age, because we already asked the question to the previous panel saying, if you remove age from the CV, what happens? Let me get straight to the point, Harish. Were you a diversity hire?
You got straight to the key point, okay? Let me ask you instead, are you a diversity hire? Because I believe that many people intentionally choose men, so aren't men diversity hires too?
That's a great point, but nowadays, every time I'm applying for a job, it says female HR head only, which itself is such a huge bias.
It is a bias, and not every bias is a wrong bias. We all get paid for our judgments. The more higher up the hierarchy you go, you get paid because you make the right judgments. And if you have to correct something, if the number is skewed and you see that there are seven CVs of men and one CV of a woman, not because the woman didn't want to apply. Anyone who says that there aren't enough women CVs are either lazy or they're looking at the wrong talent pool, right? They're looking at spaces or they've defined their jobs in such a way that only men would apply.
Or there are also women who don't want successful women to come onto the teams.
That is possible, just as many a times men don't want successful men to come on the table also. Right? So it is true, and usually this aurat ki dushman hai is usually played as a woman card against women, but it's true for men as well, right? So that many a times men don't want other men to come on this thing because they will see them as competition.
Right.
And as somebody who works in a sector which is more men than women, I can definitely say that I've seen men gossiping more than women do.
Very true.
Okay, so
very true. It's just that the place is different.
Place is different,
but they gossip as much, if not more.
And coming to your question of diversity about these specific ads, sometimes you need to be specific because the challenges that women face, challenges as LGBTQI plus people face, challenges that PWD people face, even in a place like Bombay Chamber of Commerce, this is not PWD friendly, this room is not PWD friendly, right? Even in a place like Axis Bank, why should I not hold a mirror to myself? Not every branch that you go is PWD friendly. So I think that it's important for us to keep questioning and to push borders and to be intentional. So we also had this big discussion about hiding names and CVs, names and gender. So I said, while that's a good practice to prove that you are intentional, it's also important to be intentional and to say that this is a job that I need to intentionally look for a certain gender or a certain person with disability. You need to be intentional in your efforts because the bias is so huge and it's so skewed towards men and able-bodied people that you require intentional efforts to bridge the gap.
Very true. Very, very profound as well. But I've been told it's a FireSide chat. So, thoda fire. Pallavi and gang had 40 minutes. We have only 20. And I want to give 5 minutes to the audience to ask questions. So 15 minutes. So any response, and I'm not as sweet as Pallavi, not as polite. So any answer that goes beyond 60 seconds,
Okay, cool.
I'm going to say time out. Deal?
Deal.
You like it? Or you want lambe, chaude, gyan wale answer? Super. So 60 seconds. मुझे एक बात बताओ. Was your role a tick in the box role? कि भाई diversity head चाहिए, चलो यार किसी ऐसे बंदे बंदी जो भी किसी को लेके आते हैं जो personifies the role.
एक तो ये important है कि हर department, everyone has a diversity head, which is not always the HR person, not always the, so I sometimes not always the productive person at business के side से. Somebody who's able to look at diversity. So if you ask me if it was intentional that Axis Bank hires me, it was very intentional.
Sure.
If you're asking me that it wasn't a tick in the box that they wanted a diversity person for this role, yes, it's a tick in the box. They wanted it. But was it intentional to read, to go further than that and to define my KRA in a way that it's not only defined from productivity or numbers standpoint कि इतने औरतों को डाल दो रूम में, इतने LGBT को डाल दो. Beyond that, that is also something that I also have to hold the organization responsible. The organization also has to hold the mirror to me, right? So just as I have, the organization gives me KRAs, I give the senior management KRAs in the organization and tell them कि ये चीजें तुम्हारी टीम में देखो औरतें ही नहीं है, तुम्हारी टीम में LGBT नहीं है. I pick up the phone and then I speak to them about it.
Beautiful. You know, the previous panel said measurement is not important. You don't need to measure diversity. You were sitting right beside me and you were smiling. आपके organization में ये ढोबलापन है? Measure करते हो?
मुझे लगता है कि हर organization में है ये ढोबलापन और मेरे organization में भी. We measure, but while you're measuring, are you measuring on just one index of numbers कैसे बढ़ रहे हैं या इनका inclusion और belongingness भी बढ़ रहा है क्या? वो भी measure करना important है. So while because वो ESG report में निहारिका के husband मेरे को message भेजते रहते हैं, निहारिका is over there, husband works with her, तो वो details भेजते रहते हैं कि यार आगे बढ़ा है क्या, index आगे बढ़ा है क्या. So we need to measure that. One, हाथी के दांत दुनिया को दिखाने के लिए और अंदर के लिए और दुनिया को दिखाने के लिए वो numbers से ही दिखा पाते हैं हम.
Sure.
Because people see it, because the world around us is very numerical driven. But internally, we need to have our own systems of measuring the inclusion, and it might not be measurable in terms of numbers, but in terms of opinions and feedback that we get from people.
Very nice. Harish, let's change gears, right? Can sensitivity be taught or it's very inherent?
I think sensitivity is inherent, okay, but with good examples and by telling people, many a times we don't pause to reflect, right? We are in our, chalo, abhi ye achieve kiya, chalo iske aage achieve karo. We don't pause to reflect. If you give people the time, I believe in the inherent goodness of people. If you give people the time to reflect on the goodness that they have within them, and you give them enough examples, they will be more sensitive. No one chooses to be cruel, system makes them cruel. No one chooses to be cruel with no reason.
15 साल से CEO हूँ, क्वार्टर से क्वार्टर तक, बचपन में कयामत से कयामत तक भी क्वार्टर से क्वार्टर तक प्रेशर आने लगे. Stakeholders are after you, balance sheets, all of that. The system has made me harsh. You come in as a coach to sensitize me on the 3 top things that I should do to make the place more gender sensitive, which is our topic for today. What would you recommend to me?
First, build good pressure systems for yourself.
Same
The first, which simply means
double click, yeah. Product pressure system.
pressure system से मेरा मतलब है कि तुम board की स्थापना, people who are going to keep a check on you, ensure that they are people who are advocates of diversity, and let them question you and let that pressure system be built for you. Like and define your KRA in that way. Get evaluated. वो अगर हमने पहले किया, board से ही अगर pressure हमने build किया, and start documenting, documenting things and presenting things to the world, metrics to the world, numbers to the world. and make a commitment outside to the outside world that you will achieve a certain number, you'll achieve a certain percentage, and you will achieve a certain level of inclusion within the organization. Make a commitment outside and stand true to the commitment. Build pressure systems for yourself. One is board, second public commitments is the need of the hour. You see organizations like Godrej, Access, several organizations, I'm not just talking about us, but several organizations have made an outward commitment. And three is empower individuals who are different. Empower individuals who are different. Your organization doesn't need to run on policy, and policy needs to run on practice. So empower individuals so that they could bring, and if that means that your policies need to be modified, so that the person fructifies in whatever they do, I think you need to do that.
So I love that you're sticking to 60 seconds. That's really nice. And, you guys start thinking of your questions because very quickly I'm going to come to you, and your questions, the challenge for you cannot be more than 30 seconds, right? So don't tell us your name, where you work, all that we'll figure out outside. Straight to the question, 30 seconds. Harish, let's talk about the parallel universe. The parallel universe that you've lived. Many of you all know your story, many may not know your story. But for everybody, Harish, you lived a life which was very internal, which happened with an uncle and your childhood days. And there is a life that the world saw.
You can say child sex abuse, it's okay.
And then there is a life that the world saw. Do you think all the work that you've done throughout your life, has it had more impact because, let me use the word, you've been a victim, as compared to a Sahil who may not have been a victim, and therefore if he had to play a similar role, he may not have been able to be as sensitive to the challenges and therefore may not have been that impactful. Does the hypothesis hold true, yes or no, and why?
It does hold true. I think we all are a sum of people. It's not the degree, I'm an MBA, failed in MS in finance. Okay. It's not the degrees that I've gathered over the years that have brought me here. It's my own life experience. Not what happened to me, but what I chose to make of what happened to me. That defined my entire existence. So I think that even when we evaluate people in our organizations, we need to evaluate people with stories, people with skill sets that are born out of stories that they have, their life experience. And therefore, me, I'm passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion as much as I'm passionate about any of the other causes that I have, because I see purpose in the things that I do. I'm not chasing that number. I'm chasing purpose in my life. So if it meets my purpose, I will do it. If it doesn't meet my purpose, I'll fight with anybody for that. And you require jaddo-jahad wale log in the organization. You require, I'm a corporate activist, and you require more corporate activists in the workplace.
Sure. You know, we spent some good amount of time talking about gender sensitization, sensitivity. But you know, the most important thing that is engulfing people today is toxicity at the workplace, right? And everybody's tolerance to toxicity. What are your thoughts on that? How does one manage? You've had people who work with female bosses who struggle.
Woman.
Please
don't say
female.
Female is any animal. Any
animal. How many people know what Harish just said? Just raise your hands. 1, 2, 3. You heard it right now.
Yeah.
You know now. You know now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Fantastic. Say it one more time, please.
Female is any animal with a vagina. Woman is a human animal with a vagina. Okay? And a woman doesn't need to be with a vagina also. Okay? So, regardless.
Sure. So coming to the question. But thanks for this point. Many of us didn't know it till we just heard from you. So.
I forgot your question.
Even I forgot. Anyone remember?
Toxicity. Okay. I think we need to understand one thing. Most of us speak about how beautiful our organizations are, how wonderful our organizations. But where good exists, bad will exist too. There would be people who, in whatever context, in creating pressure or pass on the pressure, you require bosses who absorb pressure, not pass on the pressure to the other person, right? So you absorb some and you pass on some. You absorb some and you pass on some. Many organizations would have people who don't absorb anything, they just pass on the whole thing to the next. So the last person standing would be the person, you'll see more attrition over there because that person is the person who is facing all the brunt. I think it's important to recognize for every organization that managers are of immense importance and to pass on the message of empathy and sensitivity. I'm not even referring to gender over here, to any man, any person. Sensitive towards, I've had women bosses who have actually told there's a boy, there's a man reporting to the woman boss, and the woman boss said कि तुम वर्क फ्रॉम होम हो सकता था उसका, तुम घर जाके तुम क्यों वर्क फ्रॉम होम लेना चाहते हो, तुम्हारी वाइफ नहीं है क्या? So I had to pick up the phone of that woman boss and tell her, I said, do you have a daughter? She said, yes. And I had to say, okay, then have you taught her to make round chapatis? And she said, why? I said, no, because that's what she has to do. Okay. And then she got offended. I said, good that you got offended. My intention was to offend you. And now at least you know that you're not supposed to speak to your male boss if you don't want that to your wife. I think to drive that and to honestly drive that and to also bravely drive that. I'm not bothered about me losing my job when I do that. Because I know the universe is big enough. I believe in the good in the world also. If I lose my job, I'll find another one. Right? To have that fearlessness is important. And to ask questions of leaders. Of, like for instance, many a time I walk into a room, there are only men in the room. I'd ask, where are all the women? And I don't really care who the person is. Even if it happens to be somebody in the senior management, I would ask, कि कहाँ है बाकी औरतें? And ये पूछना, everyone it's imperative on them. And when they say no, there's only at certain level and above that we are hired, I said, why did you promote enough people there? That's also your responsibility, sure. Right? So I think you just need to ask questions and monitor every boss to avoid toxicity, and don't pass on your toxicity to other people.
Sure. You know, what you shared actually reminded me of an incident that a friend of mine shared with me. So she overheard this conversation where they'd won a new engagement and they wanted team members to be plotted on that engagement. And they said, let's bring Raina in the room because Raina is very good. She is not married and she will be able to put in long hours on this project because that is needed. Fortunately, unfortunately, Raina overhears this conversation. When the kickoff meeting happens, again, the difference between being in the audience and on the stage, when you're in a nice corporate environment, they say, Raina, you're a fast tracker. You're doing really well. And we thought this project will give you immense amount of exposure. Of course, there will be a little bit amount of stretch, but I think you'll do very well. Raina, being Raina, goes and says, everything that you're saying here sounds very nice to my ears. But just an hour before this meeting, I heard what you actually said. And then is when the punchline comes. Harish will be, and everyone will be amazed to hear what she says. All a 25-year-old, and she says, मैं शादीशुदा नहीं हूँ, मगर मैं अनाथ नहीं. I'm not married. I may not have a family to go back to. I may not have a husband, a spouse, children, but I have parents to go back to. I'm not an orphan, right? And there was silence in that room. Now, very, very few Rainas around. Many people, like very few Harishas around, will say, I don't care whether I lose my job or not. But 90% of us have EMIs. We have spouses that have demands. Both sides. We have children. I we have girlfriends, boyfriends. We have children whose, where is Kanika? Right? 2 children, the person has to take up a job because bachcho ki fees bahut mehengi hai. So when you have those things lowering on your head as swords, and you want to speak up, but you're not able to speak up, what do you do with that turmoil that's happening with it?
I think it is quite damaging, that turmoil. And we all have succumbed to some things like these in all our, in my, I might be in DEI in 3 years, but technically I've been in DEI for all my life. I think one is to build a network for yourself, understand your self-worth, because we all question our self-worth at some point. Like, so it becomes important to know your self-worth, to understand where you come from, to understand that you will find the value, and to choose organizations. Now, if I'm able to say that I don't really care about anything, it's also because the organization allows me to speak that way, right? It's not that I would have spoken about this, I'm speaking about that knowing that Rajiv Anand, who's the Deputy Managing Director of Axis Bank, is also associated with Bombay Chamber of Commerce, right? So I'm doing that with that knowledge. I didn't do that with this thing because I think organizations need to, they like courage as one of their values, but they don't really respect courage in people. And you require people to hold that courage, and for individuals to get that courage to voice, they need to build networks, come to different events, understand their own self-worth. I don't suffer from a self-worth deficit. Okay, I know that it doesn't happen with everyone, so build yourself up so that you know your self-worth. Right? And women especially have to fight every time they need to get an appraisal done because they're pitted against most of the other men.
Men too.
So men too. But you have too many in your too many. You're competing with other men. Women are competing with other women.
Why are we competing with women?
Because most often the numbers of women are much lesser in most of the organizations.
But they are far more talented.
They could be far more talented, yes. And men could be far more talented too. True. I would suggest one thing to speak about this debate. Okay, speak from the lens of equity. Give 1 point extra to every diversity that a person could belong to.
Good
if
point.
there are 2 people who walk into the room, like you and I walk into the room, if you walk in and your life experience, okay, value the life experience. You walk in with the life experience of being, I'm just using you as metaphor. So you walk in with the life experience of belonging to a well-to-do family, being a cis man, and you have someone else walk in with the life experience of belonging not to a well-to-do family, not this thing, and if I fall into that bracket and I don't get as much points as you do, because my self-confidence also depends on the privileges that I'm born with. So if my confidence is that you give one point for every step that I had to take behind. And after that, if I stand at par with you, then evaluate me at par with you. So have that mechanism, and this cannot be defined on paper. This has to be defined over here. And we all need to do things beyond matrices. I didn't know the meaning of metrics when Amitabh Chaudhary interviewed me for the job. I didn't know the meaning. In fact, I told him I know what it means like. I don't know what it means like in the context of work, and still he chose me.
Sure.
But one of the things that you need to definitely do is beyond metrics, add 1 point in your brain about every challenge that a person has walked to reach the same door as someone else has walked to. I used you as a metaphor. तेरे साथ कोई दुश्मनी नहीं है.
I think what you say makes a lot of sense, but my hands seem tied when I need to practically implement this, and when each one of us go back to our workplace tomorrow and we want to implement what Harish said. How do we do it? Because I'll just finish the last part of the question. Harish says you can't put pen to paper, which means you can't have it documented in black and white. It's here, which is what you just said. But here in Sahil's mind may be very different from what is here in Harish's mind, may be very different from what is here in the 70 people that are sitting in this room. How do I drive equity?
I think this needs to come from the top. And if people on the top have this mindset, okay, of really living the value of courage, not just saying courage because it looks sexy in a PPT. okay, but really living the value of courage. And actually, from the top, if it comes, it will percolate in every section of the organization. But if it doesn't come to the top, it's an uphill battle for you. You know, managers who cannot get mentored by their team are bad managers. Okay, so change your manager or change the organization.
Super. Okay, we're going to flip it across to the audience, and I love the way so many hands are going up, and I see a lot of familiar faces as well. So let's start with someone who hasn't asked a question so far. You want to just very quickly come to your question if you want the mic?
I think I'm quite loud.
Lovely. Can everyone hear her?
Yes.
Super.
Wonderful. So my question is that you spoke about gender sensitization workshops and like that, but there's a lot of unconscious biases which are already formed in someone's mind when you're seeing something, right? Now I want to understand Axis Bank that you Axis Bank or any organization should see to kind of already happening.
I think more than sensitization workshops. I'm an advocate for sensitization workshops all the time. But that's also many a times a tick box exercise. Because they'll be like in my presentation, when I make a presentation to Rajiv or the CEO, I will basically say कि मैंने 1000 लोगों का sensitization workshop कर दिया. And then it looks like I've covered the entire organization because I've done it for 1 lakh people. I feel that I've done a sexy good job, right? More than that, I think what is actually needed is empowering managers besides sensitization workshop, picking up phones. So this year we started, first 2 years I followed the thing because I also had HR people leading me, and HR to हर कोई metrics नहीं देखते हैं, okay, and I am not HR, I don't want to be HR, right? So I want to see my field as something different, okay? So because everything was metricized, that worked well. This year we're doing that, okay? But in addition to that, we are picking up phones on people. Everywhere we see, I pick up the phone and say, क्या हाल चाल है, क्या कर रहे हो? मैंने देखा है कि तुमको 5 CV मिली और 5 को तुमने रिजेक्ट किया. क्या हो गया तुम्हें? कुछ प्रॉब्लम है औरतों से, औरतें नहीं कर सकती है काम. So I would pick up the phone. Or if there's a transgender person who is joining somewhere, I'll pick up the phone on the manager and speak to them. Not just have a sensitization workshop with 100 people in the room where not one person is able to listen. They just needed to show board में दिखाने के लिए वो चाहिए. मगर individually, if you want to do it purposefully, you need to pick up the phone on people and have more people who pick up the phone on people. So we have a DE&I team who doesn't just do workshops, who also picks up phones on people and tells them कि यार क्या हो गया, तुमने क्यों reject किया? And many a times people who reject themselves, and we put them in the DE&I team. कि तुम इतने बार preach करोगे तो तुम practice भी करने लग जाओगे.
Beautiful. चोर को पुलिस बना दो. Yes.
So when we say that we're looking for a diversity candidate, are we being less of an equal opportunity employer? So are we choosing?
You don't need to be equal, you need to be equitable. Okay. When you say equal opportunity, and first of all, diversity बोल के women को मत लो. Women doesn't equal diversity. Okay. Diversity means women, LGBTQ, it also includes men. Okay. Men from different caste backgrounds, men from economically challenged backgrounds. It could include men also. Your matrices, इसीलिए ना, matrices sometimes dehumanize people. Okay. क्योंकि हम लोग number देखते हैं, हम लोग सिर्फ वो percentage देखते हैं. So, and why you need to say that? Because the numbers are skewed towards men. Cisgender, heterosexual men. Okay, able-bodied heterosexual men. The numbers are skewed towards them. So until and unless you are intentional and you say मेरे को चाहिए, मेरे को औरत चाहिए ये role के लिए, मेरे को LGBT लोग, KPMG did that many years ago. They did that when they got Zainab in. They said we want a transgender person for this role, and they defined the role on the basis of what Zainab's qualifications and her abilities were. So I think that is important. That how do you define this and to be intentional. So if each one of us goes out and says, and men come out and say, hey, ये तो partiality है. Partiality तो औरतों के साथ हुआ है because वो भी diversity high रही हुए. Because people are intentionally. How often do you hear a man being asked, "तुम घर और ऑफिस कैसे मैनेज करोगे?" How often would you call up a man and you'll ask कि तुम शादी हो गई है क्या? तुम शादी? My sister was asked, and she said, "बच्चे हैं क्या?" She said, "तुम्हारे साथ तो बिल्कुल नहीं." And she walked out of the job.
Okay. Yes.
Hi. A lot of debate happened over, push approach, pull approach, top down, bottom up. Just want to ask you, when we look from a macro and we see, dark spots जहाँ पे representation है ही नहीं, and try to understand. Sometimes we try to force fill, shop floor the under, sales force over there, but we see women to join those roles. Like, so are we, when we try to, force for diversity in those roles, are we doing them a disservice, or we want, women to become more aspirational,
I think that we need to fundamentally believe one thing. See, we always make an example of things that don't work. We don't make examples of things that work. And when we make examples of things that work, it has to be an Indra Nui or something like that. There are people in this room, in every team, where you'll find good examples. So build that narrative. There are three things. Women are creatures of ambition. Women want, if they're joining the workforce, they're not doing that just to feed their husband or to be the secondary income in this thing. Every organization needs to believe that women are creatures of ambition, number one. Second, there is abundance of talent. Abundance of talent. We don't live in a world of talent scarcity. We live in a world of diversity abundance. We need to believe that. Because there are 50% of the population who are women, 17% of the population who belong to the LGBTQ community, 4 or 5% of the population who could belong to the person with disability category, and this is only including the 21 odd disabilities. If you include all the others, it will be much more, right? So there is abundance of talent. So the question of having scarcity or women not being ambitious doesn't arise. There are women who are ambitious, but you sometimes have to see that ambition because the inhibitions that women face is much more than the inhibitions that men face, right? So, तुम शादी करोगी, but like बच्चा हो जाएगा क्या, ये होएगा क्या, बच्चे नहीं. The example that Sahil just spoke about his colleague. So I think there are many more roadblocks that women have. Due to which sometimes women can start believing that यार मेरे को बस इधर job मिल गया. They feel very humbled and they have a lot of gratitude कि कम से कम job तो है. I would tell every woman, don't be satisfied. Don't be satisfied, be dissatisfied, be hungry for more. And that's the only way that women, LGBTQI plus people, that's the only way that persons with disability will find their footing. Be greedy, be ambitious. And if you don't see that ambition, if you find someone, like I see a lot with transgender people, मेरे को जॉब मिल गया, मैं बहुत खुश हूँ, मैं एक टपली देता हूँ उसको. मगर बहुत खुश क्यों है तू? तेरे को तो आगे बढ़ना चाहिए. And every manager should tell that your goal should be that you should be over here, you should be seated over here, right? If तुम्हारा मकसद to take your manager's chair is not there, then you're less ambitious.
Now, since your question is very close to my heart, let me just add 2 cents, and I know we're going to wrap up, so maybe just one more question after yours. The first is, if you're saying you can't find women, you're not looking at the right place. Very clear, right? So maybe you're not looking at the right place, look at other avenues. Second, go back to the year when basic stuff was missing. A man can stand up and urinate anywhere, a woman can't. If you don't have washrooms in your manufacturing units 50 years ago, how can you even expect a woman to come and work there? So in today's age and time, it may not be a washroom, it may be something else. But do you even understand in 8 hours of being on a plant, what does a woman need? If it's that time of the month, what does a woman need in terms of infrastructure, in terms of cramps, in terms of pains, just to ensure that she is well taken care of? If you have that, do you think a woman won't come? Of course she'll come. And the third very quick bullet point is very clear. This is scientifically proven. If 2 people are competing for a position, A man, even if he thinks that he is 5 on 10, he will apply for that role. A woman, unless she believes that she is 8 on 10, she won't even apply. Unless you don't understand this psychology, you will miss out on the entry barrier for women. So therefore, I'm not saying make an entry barrier for women 5, but all I'm saying is, are you working with that network group to understand that's the psychology? So these 3 things possibly, in addition to everything that Harish has said. Okay, I don't want to eat up time of the next panel, and I know you've been raising your hand for a long time. We'll take your question offline if you don't mind. Ma'am, please go for it.
Thanks so much. Harish, I wanted to know, you had joined as a, what are the challenges that you faced and how you overcome it? And it's for everyone who would want to, hire more specific people.
So I will not speak about LGBTQ alone, I'll speak about anyone who's different. Okay. I think the same things that any woman would be facing when she joins an organization which is all men. People look at you differently. They don't know. And here there was another thing, people used to keep looking at my crotch. Okay. Seeing whether they didn't know whether I have a penis or a vagina. Okay. So that was one added thing. And I used to very boldly go and tell them also, I said, "Na kya dekh raha hai? I have a penis. Do you want to know anything more?" And then they'll be like, they'll get started. So I think one of the things that you definitely need from an LGBTQ, first thing, हम लोग हमेशा ये पूछते हैं कि पहले sensitize करेंगे पूरे staff को, and then we will get somebody. There is never going to be a good time where the whole staff is going to be sensitized.
Yeah.
Never going to be a good time. The work that you had to do today should have been done 10 years ago. Okay. So never there is going to be a time. So the only way that you can have is people who can face it, put them in the front. So when I came in, of course there were questions about, not direct questions, because no one will dare, because when you have POSH and when you have various other policies, no one will directly ask you. Then they'll be like, no one will look at my crotch like that also. They'll be like, they'll keep looking that way, right? Or for that matter, where will I be? He spoke about the whole thing. So if I go into a men's loo, I'm wearing pants now and sometimes wear a salwar kameez because I think I look sexier in a salwar kameez, right? So I wear a salwar kameez and I go to work. And if I'm standing in a urinal, now I have to wait for like 10 minutes to remove all my nada vada and everything and then be. Okay, it's a very practical this thing. So how will that infrastructure? Every organization has a person with disability restroom. And unfortunately, every organization doesn't have enough persons with disability to use that restroom. Make it all gender and all abilities ka restroom. So that it acts as a third restroom for people. So all that we did was we did that. So infrastructure, and for that I needed to be a part of the system, right?
Yeah.
So if you wait for हम लोग सब policy बनाएंगे फिर बाद में लोग आएंगे, your policy and culture, when people say that this is the culture of my organization, please don't join that organization. Because culture is not stuck in stone. Culture is an evolving phenomenon. Culture is something that people inform and you grow and you develop further. Culture is not something that is static. कि कह दिया तो कह दिया. You're not Amitabh Bachchan from, Parampara Pratishta Anushasana. You're not Amitabh Bachchan from Mobbing. Culture has to be evolving, constantly growing. And the culture of an organization is an evolving concept, right? So as an LGBTQI plus person, what is the infrastructure you'll have? Of course, you'll have restrooms that you need. You need a dress code policy. I have a small instance which when I joined Axis Bank, I came dressed like a boring banker. Okay, like ऐसा सूट वूट पहन के ब्लेजर वेजर डाल के पहन के आया. तो मेरे को लगा जॉब मिल गया पैंडेमिक के टाइम पे, and that was the only job which I had easy apply on LinkedIn. So I had applied for all jobs and this job maybe I had and received a call back. So and they played interview for like 2 months or something. And I thought that they were bettering their interviewing skills. Everyone. Okay. So after that happened, then I received the job, this thing. So I went, why should I rock the boat so much? I also tried to comply. I went wearing a suit, a boring suit, and I went to office. After 1 week, Rajkamal Vempati, the CHRO of Axis Bank, and everyone will tell you that the HR, sorry for all the HRs in the room, HR people are very khadus. So I also thought that
Bias.
bias is bias sometimes. So I thought ki her temper is also well known because women are often misrepresented because of if a man gets angry, देखो कितना disciplined है, women gets angry, देखो कितनी temperamental है ना? So her temper was very well known, तो मेरे को लगा कि यार मेरी हो गई एक हफ्ते बाद उसने रूम में बुलाया and she said ये क्या तुमने why are you not confident, you're not dressed confidently. So I was checking my fly, if my fly open, or if I've spilled dal on my clothes. And I was like in my head, I'm thinking कि यार एक हफ्ते की तो salary देनी चाहिए ये लोगों को. And while I was doing all of this, she noticed my discomfort, and she went and she closed the door, and she put a hand over my shoulders. She shook me, and she said, "Harish, we hired you not to fit in. We hired you to stand out."
Beautiful.
So, and then she said, I said, "I didn't get you." I said, "Why are you dressed like this? You're not confident in the clothes that you're wearing." So I said, "Raj, but the dress code policy." She said, "Who's in charge of the dress code policy?" I said, "Raj, you." I said, "No, after you came in, who's in charge?" I said, "Oh, me." Okay. I said, "Change the dress code policy." So we have a dress code for men, for women, and for people from the LGBTQI plus community. Now, can there be a time when there's no dress code? Possibly yes. But let's reach that point. Probably you need to also push the envelope थोड़ा-थोड़ा. मैं पूरा ही बोलूँगा मेरे को revolution चाहिए तो बोलेगी कि तुम जाओ क्रांतिकारी मंदिर में रास्ते में जाओ. Right? So I think you need to push the envelope slowly, and that's why culture is something that evolves. And then within 6 months, we came up with a charter of policies and practices for employees and customers of the LGBTQI plus community. We became the first bank to actually have same-sex partners opening bank accounts, to the point that 2 months ago, the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment invited me, not as Axis Bank, but as an activist, to come and represent. And I went there and I spoke to them. And when I spoke to them, what's the rule in Axis Bank is now the rule of the nation. You can open your bank account in any bank if you are a same-sex partner. Both of you can open in any bank. And when I went back and when I thought that Rajiv and Amitabh are going to screw me up because because our intentionality of something that was specific to Axis is now for everyone, they appreciated the fact. They said this is not something to hold on as intellectual property, but to open up to everyone and to hold the guiding light for everyone.
I think this was a huge round of applause. It is very, very, very profound. Super. I think we could go on for the next 2 hours, but we don't want to eat up time of the next panel. So Harish, thank you so much. It was a pleasure having this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Sahil.
Thank you, Mr. Nayar and Harish, for this thought-provoking session. May I request Mr. Khosla to present a token to Harish and Mr. Nayar.
Thank God you don't have these women walking with trolleys and
Yeah.
I get very pissed off. I call out in any event. Three wali women, वो क्या trolley duties नहीं चाहिए.
Yeah, but does some things right.
Very things right.